Maya Rodriguez never imagined her life would take such a dramatic turn when she moved to Cedar Creek Ranch in rural Montana. As a 22-year-old college graduate with a degree in veterinary medicine, she'd accepted a position as the ranch's animal care specialist, eager to gain hands-on experience before applying to veterinary school. The rolling hills and endless sky seemed like the perfect escape from city life, and the job promised good pay with room and board included. The Whitman family had owned Cedar Creek Ranch for 3 generations. Jake Whitman, the current patriarch, was a stern man in his 50s who ruled the ranch with an iron fist. His wife Patricia was equally traditional, believing firmly in arranged marriages and old-world values. Their son Bradley, 28, was set to inherit the ranch and had been pressuring his parents to find him a suitable wife. When Maya arrived, Patricia's eyes lit up with possibility. Maya threw herself into her work, caring for the ranch's cattle, horses, and working dogs with dedication and skill. She quickly proved her worth, diagnosing and treating ailments that had puzzled the previous caretaker. The ranch hands respected her knowledge, and even Jake grudgingly admitted she knew her business. However, Patricia had other plans brewing in her mind. Living in the small cottage provided by the ranch, Maya enjoyed the peaceful evenings and the satisfaction of meaningful work. She'd wake before dawn to check on sick animals, spend her days treating injuries and administering medications, and often worked late into the evening during calving season. The isolation didn't bother her. She'd always been independent and focused on her career goals. Meanwhile, in the main ranch house, Patricia began dropping hints to her husband about Maya's suitability as a daughter-in-law. "She's hardworking, knows animals, and would fit right into ranch life," she'd say over dinner. Jake, primarily concerned with the ranch's success, wasn't opposed to the idea if it meant keeping their valuable veterinarian in the family. Bradley, however, had different ideas about his future wife. The first sign of trouble came during Maya's 3rd month at the ranch. Patricia invited her to dinner at the main house, an unusual gesture that made Maya slightly uncomfortable. Throughout the meal, Patricia asked pointed questions about Maya's family background, her plans for marriage, and her thoughts on ranch life. Maya answered politely but evasively, sensing an agenda behind the questions. As autumn approached, Patricia's hints became more direct. She began suggesting that Maya and Bradley spend time together, arranging situations where they'd be forced to work side by side. Maya found Bradley pleasant enough but had no romantic interest in him. More importantly, she had her sights set on veterinary school applications and had no intention of abandoning her career dreams for marriage. The tension escalated when Patricia cornered Maya in the barn one October morning. "You know, dear, you'd make Bradley a wonderful wife," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You understand ranch life, and you'd never want for anything." Maya politely declined, explaining her educational goals and lack of romantic feelings for Bradley. Patricia's expression hardened, and Maya realized she'd made a powerful enemy. The real battle for her freedom was just beginning. Maya tried to maintain her professional composure despite Patricia's increasing pressure. The older woman began making passive-aggressive comments about Maya's stubbornness and ungrateful attitude in front of the ranch hands. She'd intercept Maya's mail, claiming to be helpful, and started monitoring her phone calls. The cottage that had once felt like a sanctuary began to feel like a prison as Patricia's surveillance intensified. Jake remained largely oblivious to his wife's machinations, focused on the ranch's operations and the upcoming winter preparations. However, Bradley began showing more interest in Maya, possibly encouraged by his mother. He'd find excuses to visit the animal pens where she worked, bringing coffee or offering help she didn't need. His attention made Maya increasingly uncomfortable, especially when she noticed Patricia watching these interactions with satisfaction. The situation reached a breaking point in late October when Maya discovered Patricia had been intercepting her acceptance letters from veterinary schools. While cleaning the main house as part of her duties, Maya found the opened envelopes hidden in Patricia's desk drawer. 3 different programs had accepted her, with one offering a substantial scholarship. The letters were dated weeks earlier, and application deadlines were rapidly approaching. Confronting Patricia proved to be a mistake. The older woman didn't deny her actions but instead doubled down on her intentions. "Those schools would just fill your head with nonsense," she declared. "You have everything you need right here. Bradley cares for you, and this ranch could be your future." When Maya demanded her letters and threatened to leave immediately, Patricia's mask finally slipped completely. "You signed a contract, young lady," Patricia said coldly. "1 year minimum employment, and we've invested significant resources in your training. You'll honor that contract, and you'll give Bradley a fair chance. This family has been good to you, and it's time you showed some loyalty." Maya realized with growing horror that Patricia had been planning this manipulation from the beginning. That evening, Maya began secretly preparing to leave. She contacted her lawyer friend from college, who confirmed that while the contract was binding, it didn't prevent her from accepting educational opportunities. She started gathering her belongings discreetly and reached out to her veterinary school contacts to explain the delay in her responses. However, Patricia's network of ranch wives in the community proved more extensive than Maya had realized. Within days, Maya discovered that Patricia had been spreading rumors about her ungrateful behavior and leading Bradley on. The local feed store owner, bank manager, and even the veterinarian in the nearest town had heard Patricia's version of events. Maya found herself increasingly isolated, with former allies treating her with suspicion. Patricia had effectively weaponized the tight-knit rural community against her. The psychological pressure, intensified when Jake finally became involved. Patricia had convinced him that Maya was trying to break her contract and abandon the ranch during their busiest season. Jake called Maya into his office and delivered an ultimatum that chilled her to the bone. Jake's weathered face was stern as he sat behind his massive oak desk, Patricia standing beside him with barely concealed triumph in her eyes. "Maya, I've been hearing troubling things about your attitude lately," he began, his voice carrying the authority of 3 generations of ranch ownership. "This family has given you opportunities most folks would kill for, and now you want to run off and abandon your responsibilities." Maya stood her ground despite her racing heart. "Mr. Whitman, I've fulfilled every aspect of my contract. I've worked overtime without complaint, saved you thousands in veterinary bills, and never missed a day. My contract doesn't prohibit me from pursuing education." She kept her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly. Patricia stepped forward, her voice dripping with false concern. "Dear, you're being influenced by outside forces that don't understand our way of life. Bradley genuinely cares for you, and this ranch could provide you with security and purpose. These veterinary schools will just saddle you with debt and unrealistic expectations." "I never gave Bradley any indication of romantic interest," Maya replied firmly. "I've been professional and respectful, but I won't be coerced into a relationship I don't want. And those are my acceptance letters you've been hiding. Mail theft is a federal crime." Jake's expression darkened at the mention of crime. "Nobody's stealing anything. Patricia was just looking out for your best interests, trying to save you from making a mistake you'd regret. But since you want to be legal about everything, let's talk about your contract obligations." He pulled out Maya's employment agreement, pointing to specific clauses with his thick finger. "Right here, paragraph 12. You agreed to 1 year minimum employment with 30 days written notice required for departure. You also agreed that premature departure would require compensation for training investments and replacement costs. We calculate that at about $15,000. Maya's heart sank as she remembered signing the contract without thoroughly reading the fine print, trusting that a family ranch would be straightforward in their dealings. "I don't have $15,000, and you know it. Most of my salary goes to student loans and living expenses." Patricia's smile became predatory. "Well then, it seems you have 2 choices, dear. Honor your commitment to this family by giving Bradley a real chance and staying through your full contract, or find a way to pay what you owe. There is, of course, a third option. Marriage would nullify the employment contract entirely." The room fell silent except for the ticking of Jake's antique clock. Maya realized she was trapped in a nightmare scenario where her own competence had made her valuable enough to imprison. The Whitmans had carefully constructed a cage of legal obligations and financial impossibility, with marriage as the only offered key. "I need time to think," Maya said finally, knowing she needed to explore her legal options carefully. "I'll give you my decision within the week." Jake nodded curtly, but Patricia's expression suggested this delay wasn't acceptable. As Maya left the office, she heard Patricia's voice drop to an urgent whisper, though she couldn't make out the words. That night, Maya called her lawyer friend Sarah Chen, who listened with growing alarm to the situation. "This sounds like indentured servitude with extra steps," Sarah said bluntly. "The contract might be legally binding, but their behavior is entering criminal territory. Document everything and start recording conversations if your state allows single-party consent." Maya spent the next few days in a haze of anxiety and careful planning. She began secretly recording conversations and documenting Patricia's increasingly erratic behavior. The older woman had apparently decided that subtle pressure wasn't working fast enough and began making veiled threats about Maya's professional reputation and future job prospects in veterinary medicine. The breaking point came when Maya overheard Patricia on the phone with someone, discussing making sure that girl understands her place and traditional methods of discipline. The phrase sent chills down Maya's spine as she realized the Whitmans might be planning something far worse than financial pressure. She decided she had to escape immediately. Consequences be damned. Maya's escape plan was simple but risky. She would wait until the weekend when most of the ranch hands went into town, pack only essentials, and drive her car to the nearest city where Sarah could meet her. However, Patricia's surveillance network proved more comprehensive than Maya had realized. Within hours of beginning to pack, Jake appeared at her cottage door with Bradley and two of the burliest ranch hands. "Going somewhere?" Jake asked, his voice dangerously quiet as he took in the partially packed suitcases. "Because Patricia mentioned you might be having second thoughts about honoring your commitments." The ranch hands, men Maya had worked alongside for months, wouldn't meet her eyes. She realized they'd been recruited as enforcers. "I have the right to leave," Maya said, stepping back as the men entered her small living space uninvited. "I'll pay whatever penalties the contract requires, but I'm not staying here to be coerced into marriage." Her voice carried more confidence than she felt as she watched her escape route disappear. Bradley finally spoke, his voice carrying a note of genuine regret. "Maya, this doesn't have to be difficult. I know my mother comes on strong, but she just wants what's best for everyone. I care about you, and I think we could build something good together. Why not just give us a chance?" "Because I don't love you, Bradley," Maya replied with painful honesty. "I have career goals and dreams that don't include marriage right now. That's not a rejection of you personally, but it's not fair to either of us to pretend otherwise." She saw something shift in his expression, hurt pride mixed with growing anger. Jake stepped forward, his patience clearly exhausted. Enough talking. You're going to honor your contract and you're going to stop filling my son's head with rejection. Patricia has some ideas about adjusting your attitude, and I think it's time we implemented them. The threat in his voice was unmistakable, and Maya realized her situation had just become truly dangerous. The ranch hands moved to block the door while Jake continued his ultimatum. You can choose to cooperate and make this easy on everyone, or we can do this the hard way. Either path leads to the same destination, you staying here and giving my family the respect we deserve. Maya's hands shook as she realized these people were prepared to use force to keep her trapped. Patricia appeared in the doorway, her expression cold and determined. I tried to be patient and understanding, but you forced our hand, she said. Sometimes young women need to be reminded of their place and the consequences of defiance. My grandmother had effective methods for dealing with stubborn girls, and I think it's time we revived some old-fashioned discipline. As the implications of Patricia's words sank in, Maya felt true terror for the first time. The woman was talking about physical punishment, possibly even what earlier generations might have called corrective violence. Maya realized she was facing people who believed they had the right to physically force her compliance, and she was completely alone with no immediate way to call for help. Maya's mind raced as she realized the full scope of her predicament. The cottage suddenly felt claustrophobic with 5 people blocking her escape routes, and Patricia's mention of old-fashioned discipline carried ominous historical implications. She thought of countless women throughout history who had been corrected through violence when they refused to comply with family expectations. You can't be serious, Maya said, backing toward the kitchen area where she might find something to defend herself with. This is 2024. You can't just force someone into marriage through intimidation and violence. There are laws against this. Her voice carried desperation as she grasped for any appeal to reason. Patricia laughed bitterly. Laws written by people who don't understand the realities of ranch life or the importance of family loyalty. Out here, we handle our own problems, and you, young lady, have become a problem that needs solving. She nodded to the ranch hands, who began moving closer to Maya. Jake's voice carried the weight of absolute authority as he spoke. My family has owned this land for 3 generations. We've weathered economic downturns, natural disasters, and social changes that destroyed lesser families. We didn't survive by being weak or allowing outsiders to disrespect our values. You accepted our hospitality and our investment in your future. Now you'll honor that debt. Bradley looked increasingly uncomfortable as the situation escalated beyond his control. "Dad, maybe we should just let her go," he said quietly. "This isn't what I wanted. I never asked you to force her into anything." His protest carried little conviction, and Maya realized he was more concerned about his own conscience than her safety. "You're too soft, son," Patricia snapped at Bradley. "This girl has played you for a fool, accepting our kindness while planning to abandon us all along. She needs to learn that actions have consequences, and families protect their interests." Her eyes glittered with something that looked almost like anticipation as she contemplated Maya's punishment. The largest ranch hand, a man named Buck whom Maya had always considered friendly, shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Whitman, I'm not sure about this," he said hesitantly. "Maybe we should just dock her pay and let her work off the debt. This seems like it might go too far." His concern offered Maya a slim hope that not everyone was completely committed to this madness. Patricia's expression hardened as she turned on Buck. "Are you questioning my judgment? Because if you are, you can find employment elsewhere. This ranch doesn't tolerate disloyalty from employees any more than from ungrateful beneficiaries." The threat was clear, and Buck stepped back, his brief moment of conscience crushed by economic necessity. Maya saw her last ally disappear and knew she was truly alone against people who had convinced themselves that violence was justified. She thought of her acceptance letters, her dreams of veterinary school, and the life she'd planned that was slipping away. The unfairness of it all made her angry, and anger gave her strength. "You're all insane," she said loudly, hoping someone outside might hear. "You can't just imprison someone and force them into marriage. When people realize I'm missing, there will be investigations. My lawyer friend knows exactly where I am and what you've been threatening." It was partially a bluff, but she hoped it might make them reconsider. Patricia's cold laughter echoed through the cottage as Maya's desperate words hung in the air. "Your lawyer friend in the city. By the time anyone thinks to look for you, you'll be Mrs. Bradley Whitman, settled into your new life and singing a very different tune about your happiness here." The certainty in her voice suggested this wasn't their first experience with coercion. Jake moved closer, his weathered hands flexing into fists. "We've been patient, but patience has limits. Patricia's grandmother dealt with rebellious women by giving them a choice: accept their responsibilities willingly, or learn acceptance through correction. The methods were effective then, and they'll be effective now." His matter-of-fact tone made the threat even more chilling. "Correction." Maya's voice cracked slightly as the full horror of their intentions became clear. "You're talking about beating me into submission. That's not correction, that's torture. That's criminal assault." She looked around desperately for any means of escape or defense, but the cottage's cozy layout had become a trap. Bradley finally found his voice again, though it carried little authority. "Maybe we could try talking to her again tomorrow when everyone's calmer," he suggested weakly. "This feels wrong, Dad. I want a wife who chooses me, not someone who's been forced into it." His words offered hope, but Patricia quickly crushed it. Choices are luxuries for people who have earned them, Patricia declared. This girl has proven she can't be trusted to make good decisions. Sometimes we have to make hard choices for people's own good. My grandmother always said that a properly corrected woman became the most grateful and devoted wife. The historical weight of her words revealed generations of normalized abuse. The second ranch hand, younger than Buck, spoke up nervously. "Mrs. Whitman, what exactly are you planning to do? Because if this goes legal, I don't want to be part of anything that could land me in prison." His concern was clearly more self-preservation than moral objection, but it highlighted the criminal nature of their intentions. Jake's patience finally snapped completely. Enough discussion. Every minute we waste gives her more time to think up new defiance. Patricia, get the rope from the barn. If she won't listen to reason, she'll learn respect the way stubborn animals do. His casual reference to treating her like livestock revealed the complete dehumanization in his mind. Maya's terror peaked as she realized they were actually planning to physically restrain and harm her. The cottage felt like it was closing in as her options disappeared one by one. She thought about screaming, but they were miles from the nearest neighbor. She considered fighting, but she was outnumbered 5-1 by people much stronger than herself. As Patricia headed toward the door to retrieve the rope, Maya made a desperate decision. She would not go quietly into whatever nightmare they had planned. If they were going to assault her, they would have to work for it, and she would make enough noise that someone, somewhere, might hear and investigate. Her grandmother hadn't survived the Depression by being passive, and Maya wouldn't dishonor that legacy by surrendering without a fight. Maya's resolve crystallized as Patricia reached for the door handle. In that moment of clarity, she remembered her self-defense classes from college and her grandmother's stories about surviving impossible situations through sheer determination. If these people wanted to treat her like property, they would discover that some property fights back with everything it has. "Wait," Maya said, her voice suddenly steady and strong. The change in her tone made everyone pause and turn toward her. "Before you do something you'll all regret, you should know that I've been recording our conversations for the past week. Every threat, every mention of forced marriage, every plan for physical violence, it's all documented and automatically uploaded to cloud storage." The lie rolled off her tongue with surprising conviction, born from desperation, and her lawyer friend's earlier advice about documentation. She watched their faces carefully for any sign that her bluff might work. Buck looked genuinely concerned, while the younger ranch hand took a step back from the group. Jake's face darkened dangerously. "You're lying. We would have seen you recording." But there was uncertainty in his voice that hadn't been there before. Maya pressed her advantage, hopping to create enough doubt to buy herself time or an escape opportunity. Voice-activated apps run in the background, Maya continued, her voice gaining confidence. Every word you've spoken is already in the hands of my attorney, along with detailed documentation of your wife's mail theft and your contract manipulation. If I don't check in with her by midnight, she's filing emergency injunctions and calling the FBI. Patricia's face went white as the implications sank in. Mail theft was indeed a federal crime, and if Maya could prove the Whitmans had been intercepting her correspondence, it would add serious legal weight to any assault charges. "Check her phone," she ordered Buck frantically. "Find those recordings and delete them." But Maya had one more card to play. "The recordings aren't on my phone," she said with a slight smile. "They're on a device you haven't found, streaming live to external servers. Even if you destroy my phone, the evidence is already preserved. Your only choice now is to let me leave peacefully and hope I don't press charges." The room fell silent except for the sound of heavy breathing and the distant lowing of cattle. Maya could see the mental calculations happening in each person's mind as they weighed the risks of proceeding against the certainty of criminal prosecution. The balance of power had suddenly shifted, and everyone knew it. Bradley was the first to break the silence. "Dad, if she really has recordings, we need to let her go. I don't want to spend the next decade in prison over this." His voice carried relief, as if Maya's revelation had given him permission to abandon a plan he'd never been comfortable with. Jake's authority was crumbling as the legal realities became clear. Assault, kidnapping, coercion, mail theft. The charges would be devastating for their family and their ranch. "Show us the device," he demanded, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. He was beginning to realize that Maya might have outmaneuvered them all. The young ranch hand spoke up again, his voice shaking slightly. "Mr. Whitman, I think we should call this off. I can't afford legal trouble. I've got a family to support. If there's evidence of what we were planning, we need to back down now." His defection further weakened Jake's position. Maya sensed the momentum shifting in her direction and pressed forward. "I'm walking out of here right now," she announced, moving toward her packed suitcases. "Anyone who tries to stop me will be adding kidnapping and false imprisonment to the charges they're already facing. My attorney has clear instructions about what to do if I don't make contact within the next few hours." Patricia made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "You ungrateful little witch," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay our kindness. You'll regret this decision for the rest of your life." But her words carried no power now, just the bitter anger of someone whose carefully laid plans had collapsed. As Maya picked up her suitcases and moved toward the door, she felt a surge of triumph mixed with lingering fear. She had faced down her captors through intelligence and deception, turning their own paranoia against them. But she wasn't safe yet. She still had to get off the ranch property and to safety before they realized her bluff and decided the risk was worth taking. Maya stepped through the cottage door into the cool Montana evening, her heart pounding as she walked the 30 yards to her car. Behind her, she could hear urgent whispered arguments as the Whitmans debated their next move. Every step felt like it might be her last moment of freedom if they decided to call her bluff and drag her back inside. Her hands shook as she fumbled with her car keys, hyper-aware of the voices behind her growing more agitated. Patricia's voice rose above the others, insisting they couldn't just let her leave, while Bradley argued for cutting their losses. The younger ranch hand had apparently already started walking away, unwilling to risk his freedom for his employer's schemes. The car engine turned over on the first try, a small miracle that Maya accepted gratefully. As she put the vehicle in drive, she saw Jake emerge from the cottage, his face a mask of frustrated rage. For a terrifying moment, she thought he might try to block her path or disable her car, but Buck grabbed his arm and said something that made him step back. Maya drove slowly down the ranch's gravel driveway, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to floor the accelerator and race away. She knew that appearing too eager to escape might convince them she was bluffing about the recordings. Instead, she maintained a steady pace while watching her rearview mirror for any signs of pursuit. Only when she reached the main road did Maya allow herself to breathe freely. Her hands were still trembling as she pulled out her phone and called Sarah Chen. "I'm out," she said when her friend answered, "but I need legal help immediately. They were planning to physically assault me to force compliance, and I may have made some promises about evidence that I can't entirely deliver on." Sarah's voice was sharp with concern. "Are you safe? Get to the nearest police station immediately and file a report. Even if you don't have recordings, their behavior constitutes criminal conspiracy and attempted kidnapping. We can work with what you do have: the intercepted mail, the contract coercion, and witness statements." As Maya drove through the dark Montana countryside toward the county seat, she reflected on how close she had come to disappearing into a nightmare of forced marriage and abuse. The Whitmans had nearly succeeded in their plan because they'd underestimated her intelligence and overestimated their own power. They had forgotten that even trapped animals could be dangerous when cornered. The next few hours blurred together as Maya gave her statement to sheriff's deputies, who listened with growing alarm to her account. The intercepted veterinary school letters alone constituted mail theft, and the threats of physical violence elevated the situation to serious criminal territory. Deputy Martinez assured her that they would investigate immediately, though he warned that proving intent might be challenging without recordings. Maya spent the night in a motel room, jumping at every sound and constantly checking to ensure her door was securely locked. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came in brief, fitful intervals interrupted by nightmares about Rope and Patricia's cold smile. She had escaped physical harm, but the psychological trauma would take much longer to heal. The next morning brought news that surprised everyone involved. Buck, the ranch hand who had shown moments of conscience, had contacted the sheriff's office overnight. Apparently, Maya's mention of recordings had convinced him that the truth would come out eventually, and he wanted to cooperate rather than face obstruction charges. His statement corroborated every detail of Maya's account. Within 48 hours, Jake and Patricia Whitman were in custody facing multiple felony charges. The local newspaper picked up the story, and Maya found herself at the center of a media firestorm about modern-day forced marriage attempts. Bradley, who had cooperated with authorities and testified against his parents, faced lesser charges and eventually pleaded guilty to conspiracy. Maya's story became a cautionary tale about the persistence of patriarchal control and the lengths some families will go to maintain their vision of traditional values. But for Maya herself, it became a story of survival and the power of quick thinking under extreme pressure. She had faced down her would-be captors and won her freedom through courage and intelligence when physical strength wasn't an option. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, but Maya was finally free to pursue her dreams. The veterinary schools she had been accepted to worked with her to defer her admission while she dealt with the legal aftermath of her ordeal. Sarah Chen represented her pro bono, ensuring that the Whitmans faced full consequences for their actions while protecting Maya's interests throughout the process. In the end, Maya's quick thinking about non-existent recordings had saved her from becoming another statistic in the long history of women forced into unwanted marriages. Her story would eventually inspire other young women facing similar coercion to seek help rather than suffer in silence. The girl who had started out just wanting to help animals had ended up helping humans by exposing the dangerous delusions of those who believed they could own other people's lives. The aftermath of Maya's escape sent shockwaves through the tight-knit ranching community around Cedar Creek. News traveled fast in rural Montana, and within days, everyone knew about the Whitmans' arrest and the bizarre circumstances surrounding Maya's employment. Some neighbors expressed shock and disbelief, while others quietly admitted they had always found Patricia's intensity concerning. Local law enforcement took the case seriously, partly because of the clear evidence of male tampering, and partly because Maya's lawyer had connections that ensured proper attention. Detective Sarah Morrison, who specialized in domestic violence and coercion cases, was assigned to lead the investigation. She had seen similar patterns before: isolated victims, economic control, and families who believed traditional values justified extreme measures. The discovery of Maya's intercepted veterinary school letters provided the strongest physical evidence. Patricia had kept them in her desk, apparently planning to use them as leverage in future negotiations. The letters, combined with Buck's detailed testimony about the planned correction, painted a clear picture of premeditated coercion and conspiracy to commit assault. Maya's story began attracting attention beyond Montana's borders when a local journalist submitted it to a national publication focused on women's rights issues. The article, titled Modern Indentured Servitude, When Employment Becomes Imprisonment, sparked conversations about labor exploitation and the vulnerability of young professionals in isolated positions. Maya found herself reluctantly thrust into the spotlight as an advocate for worker protections. Bradley Whitman's cooperation with prosecutors revealed additional disturbing details about his family's mindset. According to his testimony, Patricia had been planning Maya's integration into the family from her first week of employment. The elder woman had researched Maya's background extensively, identifying her student debt and career ambitions as pressure points that could be exploited. The calculated nature of the scheme horrified investigators. Meanwhile, Maya struggled with the psychological aftermath of her experience. Simple tasks like checking her mail or meeting new people triggered anxiety as she processed how thoroughly she had been manipulated and controlled. Therapy helped her understand that her trauma responses were normal and that she had shown remarkable strength in escaping an impossible situation. Her therapist specialized in helping victims of coercive control rebuild their sense of agency. The trial preparations revealed more victims of the Whitmans' controlling behavior. Former employees came forward with stories of economic manipulation, though none as extreme as Maya's case. Several described Patricia's tendency to become involved in their personal lives, offering unsolicited advice about relationships and careers, while creating dependencies that made leaving difficult. A pattern of predatory employment practices emerged. Jake Whitman's defense team argued that their client had been manipulated by his domineering wife and genuinely believed they were helping Maya make good life choices. However, his recorded statements about correcting Maya like a stubborn animal contradicted any claims of benevolent intentions. The prosecution painted him as an equal partner in a scheme that reduced a brilliant young woman to property to be bartered. Patricia's psychological evaluation, ordered by the court, revealed a complex mix of narcissistic personality traits and deeply ingrained beliefs about gender roles and family hierarchy. The psychologist noted her complete inability to empathize with Maya's perspective or acknowledge the criminality of her actions. She seemed genuinely confused about why forcing someone into marriage was considered wrong rather than traditionally appropriate. As the legal process continued, Maya made the difficult decision to proceed with her veterinary education despite the ongoing trial. The University of Colorado's veterinary program worked with her to create a modified schedule that accommodated her court appearances, and several professors offered additional support recognizing the extraordinary circumstances she had faced. Her story had made her something of a celebrity among students advocating for worker rights. The broader implications of Maya's case sparked legislative discussions about employment contract protections and the need for clearer guidelines about worker mobility. Labor rights advocates pointed to her situation as an example of how legal employment agreements could be weaponized to create modern forms of bondage, particularly for young workers with limited resources and experience. Maya's courage in speaking publicly about her experience, despite the personal cost, helped other victims recognize similar patterns in their own lives. The domestic violence hotlines reported increased calls from women in rural areas who had previously felt too isolated or ashamed to seek help. Maya's story demonstrated that even in remote locations, resources and support were available for those brave enough to reach out. The case also exposed the particular vulnerabilities faced by young professionals in specialized fields. Maya's expertise had made her valuable enough to imprison, but her student debt and career ambitions had provided the leverage her captors needed. The incident highlighted the need for professional organizations to provide better guidance and support for members entering potentially isolating work situations. As Maya prepared to testify at trial, she reflected on how the experience had changed her understanding of power, autonomy, and resistance. She had learned that freedom was something that could be lost gradually through seemingly reasonable compromises, until suddenly it was gone entirely. But she had also learned that intelligence, courage, and determination could overcome even the most carefully constructed traps. The trial itself became a media sensation, drawing national attention to issues of labor exploitation and gender-based coercion. Maya's testimony was clear and compelling, as she described the systematic erosion of her freedom and the terror she had felt when she realized the Whitmans were prepared to use violence to enforce their will. Her composure under cross-examination impressed observers and demonstrated the strength she had developed through surviving her ordeal. The defense's attempts to portray Maya as an ungrateful employee who had led Bradley on fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence. Patricia's own recorded statements about correcting rebellious women provided damning insight into her mindset, while Buck's testimony about the planned physical punishment destroyed any claims of innocent intentions. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all major charges. Jake Whitman received a sentence of 8 years for conspiracy, coercion, and mail tampering. Patricia, identified as the primary architect of the scheme, received 12 years. Bradley's cooperation earned him a reduced sentence of 3 years probation and community service, though his reputation in the community was permanently damaged. The ranch was eventually sold to pay legal fees and civil settlements. Maya's civil lawsuit against the Whitmans resulted in a substantial settlement that covered her legal expenses, therapy costs, and punitive damages for the trauma she had endured. More importantly, it sent a message to other employers that attempting to control workers' personal lives through economic coercion would carry serious financial consequences. The settlement allowed Maya to complete her veterinary education without financial stress. Years later, Dr. Maya Rodriguez would establish a practice specializing in large animal veterinary medicine, the career she had always dreamed of pursuing. She used her platform to advocate for worker protections and spoke regularly at conferences about recognizing and escaping coercive employment situations. Her experience at Cedar Creek Ranch had nearly destroyed her dreams, but ultimately gave her a deeper understanding of how to help others facing similar challenges. The cottage where Maya had nearly been imprisoned was eventually demolished when the ranch changed hands. The new owners, aware of the property's history, wanted no reminders of the Whitmans' crimes. But Maya's story lived on as a testament to the power of courage and quick thinking in the face of seemingly impossible odds. She had refused to become a victim, and instead became a voice for others who might find themselves trapped by those who believed they had the right to control other people's lives.